Singh, Dr. Satyam Gupta, Dr. Bhagwati Wadikar, Dr. Hassan Khan, Dr. J.L. Goel. Yeah, okay. Is that Dr. Goel? Yeah. Okay. Dr. Prashant Bavankule. Are you Dr.? Okay, please come, please take your seats. So I think we'll start with the first talk. Is Dr. Sheikh Mohammad Zakir here? Okay, very good. So he'll be speaking on camp postings for residents in favor of this topic. No, I'll come. We are already late, so 4 minutes only.
At the outset, I would like to thank AIOS and the ARC for having given me this opportunity to speak on this topic, camp posting for residents. It is to keep or versus to do away. I am assistant professor at the AMU Institute of Ophthalmology. I have no financial disclosures in any of the in any articles or any. I am going to speak in favor of keeping the postings of residents in camps. I have no financial disclosures. I am speaking in favor of keeping the posting of residents for camps. We are in India, a country with vast diversity in climate, culture, religions, socioeconomic status, and the people. There's a need of the I camps. We have a population of about 1.2 billion. Prevalence of about 0.1% calculates to about 1.2 million. A huge burden of blindness is there, but fortunately in India, cataract blindness forms the bulk, and which is easy to diagnose and cure with a simple single procedure, unlike glaucoma and AMD. For the same, the camp strategy was formulated many decades ago, and these camps have evolved, and they are a time-tested way in the Indian scenario. So why to involve the residents? They learn the spirit of teamwork. They'll see a wide range of pathologies over a short span of time. And they get a chance to operate in good numbers. And they learn what's behind the OT, things just in the OT, on the table. There are many more things beyond that and beyond the OT. It's a major rehearsal. Repetition of action strengthens memory and incorporates skills into reflexes. They'll get a chance to learn collaboration with the public sector and the NGOs. And it's a high volume coverage. We have a large number of cases to be operated, and it's a good way. And imparting health education to the masses. This is the time to learn to impart health education to the common people. They learn what are the common practices prevalent in the society. They understand the importance of health education. I'll conclude. They learn spirit of teamwork. They observe wide spectrum of cases. They'll get huge volume to operate. It's a major rehearsal. And service to humanity is service to God. They'll go out to see where India lives. They learn imparting health education. They learn the art of communication or collaboration with the public and private sector and the NGOs. And it's important that they learn charity work. And it breaks the monotonous routine of the hospital. The lessons learned, they are for life. they leave their memories. The camp posting trains residents to carry the torch ahead in the next generation. I thank you, all of you, for a patient hearing.
Thank you. Now I invite Dr. Malika Goel. She will be speaking on camp posting for residents, whether it should be done away.
Good morning. I'd like to thank Dr. Biswas for this opportunity. So, as the previous speaker, very accomplished speaker spoke, definitely residents learn a lot from the camps, and they should be going to the camps. The only caveat being that they should not be allowed to operate in these camps, certainly not without supervision. So, camps do serve a huge need in a country like ours. But the problem with camps is that they repeatedly get into trouble because of the lack of quality consciousness. There is a need to cut costs all the time, and so it becomes a breeding ground for infection. Equipment is often not sterilized, and substandard drugs may be used. And again, the same point that the residents are often allowed to operate, and this becomes a training ground for these residents, which leads to severe complications, can lead to severe complications. And so the gynecologists have actually, camps have been abolished in Orissa because of this reason. And there have been repeated incidents of mass complications, mass infections, and loss of vision repeatedly because of these eye camps. And these are only very few where there is epidemics of blindness. And so the Indian Medical Association came up with recommendations for the eye camps that only experienced qualified ophthalmic surgeons should be allowed to operate, those who are registered already with the MCI or the State Medical Council. So this does not include residents to be operating independently on these patients, and a pathologist should be there to examine the urine and blood, a dentist to check for sepsis, and a physician for general check. All medicines should be of quality that is verified by the doctor in charge of the camp. So these things make it almost on par with a good hospital treatment. And the Punjab Health Department, following incidents of blindness in their camps, has come out with these laws. You cannot have a camp without the permission from their director health, and the doctor's qualification should be cleared by their district civil surgeon. So it cannot be that the PG students can go and operate or residents can go and operate. The qualification of the operating surgeon has to be cleared, and there has to be videography of the entire camp so that things don't go unsupervised. And similarly, the NPCB came out with several guidelines which restricted the number of surgeries that can be done, and most importantly, surgeries can only be done in fixed operation theaters that are meant for eye surgeries. The camps can only screen the patients and get them to this base hospital for surgeries. So the residents can certainly run the OP, the screening outpatient, and they can assist the surgeries with the senior experienced surgeons, but they should not be allowed to operate independently. So these are the various guidelines come out, the AIOS guidelines, where the combined surgeries should not be done, meaning combined with vitrectomy, etc. Or if there are multiple systemic problems, these should not be done. One-eyed patients, as far as possible, avoid, but if it has to be done, then with special care. And high-risk cases and topical surgeries also only by very experienced surgeons. And all with after a fitness, each patient should have got from a physician. So that's the point. Residents, as the previous speaker said, of course they gain immensely from exposure to camps, and that's a life learning lesson. Certainly, a lot of things they can learn, but they should not be allowed to operate independently. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Malika. Any comments from the House?
I'm Dr. Gupta. As such, there are orders now. Earlier, a national program for control of blindness was started by Dr. L.P. Agarwal. At that time, we were operating in the camps. But since the program has been modified in 1996 and it has come under the supervision of Dr. Badrinath sir, he has told that no, only base camp approach will be done. Patient will not be operated.
Yes.
So nowadays, if somebody is doing that, that is doing wrong. 96, Dr. Badrinath in his program, when he modified this program, he has clearly defined. You will go, you will have camp, but all the patients, they will be brought to your base camp, and there only you will operate. So there is no question of operating. If somebody is doing that, is doing wrong. then resident as such, they are not supposed to operate independently, whether in your institution or whether in the camp. So in the camp, they are getting opportunity because large number of patients are there. So that opportunity should be given, and certainly that will be under the supervision. So residents should not be involved in the camp. That I don't agree. Other residents
No,
get
nobody
good
is saying
amount
that.
of
I
work.
think nobody is saying that they should not be involved. They should not be left to operate without supervision.
Without supervision,
That's-
otherwise also they can't operate.
Absolutely.
They have to operate. Even in a medical college where I am working, we don't allow them to operate. Until unless the specialist is there, they can't operate. Even if specialist should be there inside the OT, then only they will operate.
So I
That
think
is
both
again the
speakers,
rule.
so
Rule
that's what
of-
we are saying. That's what we are
Yeah,
saying.
that's rule again is there, that they will not operate without that. Thank you.
These days, virtually everyone is discouraged in camp surgery. Now, no one, I think there may be very few who will be operating in camps, but virtually it has gone.
It's
out
not
of-
even allowed. As per various
Now-
guidelines, NPCB has clearly said you cannot operate in the same area where you are screening. They have to be brought to the base camp. So it's not even allowed now.
No, yeah.
Even the AIOS guidelines do not allow it.
Okay.
So if somebody is doing it, I think it's not even permitted.
Okay. Thank you.
Just one more thing.
Thank you. Now, we
can
come to
it-
the next topic, performing A scan and B scan by residents, to do versus not to do. Dr. Sumita Mahapatra, she will be speaking on performance of A scan and B scan by residents.
Good morning, everyone. At the outset, let me thank you, the team ARC, for giving me this opportunity. Performing A scan and B scan by residents, my motion is to do. Next is, how to go to the next? Next is not moving. So the residents should do the different diagnostic technologies, because with the advent of new diagnostic tools to aid in the management of a patient, correct interpretation becomes very much essential. And A and B scan are the diagnostic tool which are indispensable in the life of a practitioner. So A scan, as you know, as today's cataract patients are becoming more and more demanding, a small error is unforgivable. The A scan has to be very accurate to satisfy both the surgeons and the patients. In our country, we still get a large number of mature cataracts and cataracts with grade 4 nuclear sclerosis, in which the IOL master will not help. Moreover, IOL master is not available in all the centers, so every resident has to learn the ultrasonic method. Moreover, the B scan is necessary, and it is the first line of investigation in suspected vitreoretinal diseases with opaque media, also in ocular trauma cases for assessing collateral damage and whether an foreign body is present or not. With the proper examination technique, one can gather a vast amount of information not possible with the clinical examination alone. So as an on-call ophthalmologist, it is an indispensable tool for the diagnosis and triage of the ophthalmic emergencies. But in the case of setting up suspected open glove injury, one has to be very, very careful. And only an experienced technician, experienced doctor can do these things without damaging the globe any further. Also, it can accurately diagnose the retinal detachment in case of emergency when the retinal view is obstructed. So in the perception of the young ophthalmologist, according to a survey conducted by the ARC of the IOS, the residents felt their training was inadequate for them to deal with the patient care they were expected to deliver and completing the residency, and diagnostic modalities like OCTs and ultrasound B scan were not adequately taught during their residency period. So in this table you can see that the teaching of each clinical skill was rated by the respondents, and A scan was having some amount of training because it was having a score of mean 7, but B scan was lagging behind very much with a mean of only 5.4. So there are certain tricky situations when if a resident cannot do, then he cannot perform in his real life. There's like in the presence of a foreign body, he has to know in which angle it has to search for. And there are also detecting one dropped IOL or dropped lens inside the vitreous cavity, he has to be very careful in which axial illumination or longitudinal illumination or transverse illumination, transverse scan he is going to do. Moreover, in case of biometry also, the silicon filled IOL, silicon filled eye, and the posterior staphyloma poses a problem. So they should have proper experience in that. There are certain advantages of performing during residency. They can have a supervised training and they can know all the problems, they can get it cleared. But the hands-on experience really helps when the time comes to an actual patient. So taking residents' feedback, they tell that they feel satisfied with the training regarding the interpretation, but the lack of training, they said, they limit their abilities to offer helpful guidance to optometrists in challenging cases. So a comprehensive curriculum for both hands-on and ultrasound A and B scan instruction is almost a universal need, and that is also taught by the national curriculum where ophthalmic A scan, B scan is a must. In the learning pyramid, you can also see that the learning by doing is better for retention time while listening. Speaking of a new skill as simple as watch and learn, definitely not. Your student have to do it themselves. So what is the great use of the performing a scan if all that is required is reading a report? We have to know that the ultrasound machines are not magic boxes. You can sit a patient in front of it and the correct recording will come. If you have never held a probe in your hand, your training is not complete. So in my opinion, performing A scan and B scan by resident is just a must. So we have to go with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we call upon Dr. Sonal Kalia. She will be speaking against.
A very good afternoon. I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity given to me by Dr. Partha Biswas sir and Dr. Sunil Morekar sir for being a part of this ARC debate. So I'm extremely thankful to Mahapatra ma'am, the previous speaker, for highlighting such nice points. Now let's see what I have come up with. So I scratched my head and wondered about this daunting topic, that why should residents not be allowed to do independent. What I understood was that this is meaning a total independence in performance of B scan and A scan. So learning under direct supervision of trained expert is mandatory in residency. But what about independent performance? So as I think, the interpretation of complex findings in real time. Now you give a scan to a student in the setting in which it's a class or it's a setting in which he is or she is sitting casually, but when there is rush of 20 patients and he's trying to interpret those findings, it's a different matter. Now missing out on vital finding and the patient's anxiety level. Then ultimately the intricate decision making involved based on the findings that the resident has brought forward. Now, just knowing that what a A scan or a B scan means does not mean that each and every case is going to be simple. A resident might miss on a small staphyloma or might not bother to change the gain and may add to the trauma during the traumatic cases. Also, now coming to a recent incident that happened. This is a patient's report who underwent phacotrabeculectomy in the left eye. She had chronic angle closure glaucoma in both her eyes and mature senile cataract in the left eye. She was 65 years old. She underwent a totally uneventful surgery, and post-operatively, we had a hyperopic refractive surprise of about 6 diopters. Now, when the records were checked, the patient, because it was a mature senile cataract, had undergone an A scan, and the axial length was determined wrongly. And after that, we started examining again, and this time now the media was clear. So the IUL master also gave a report, and the A scan also was repeated. 33 diopter was to be implanted, instead of which 26 was implanted. And the patient underwent a complicated IUL exchange because the anterior chamber depth was just 1.9 mm, and then some amount of descemet detachment occurred. Now, this was totally unwarranted when this patient could have had good vision in the first surgery itself. And the the complicated IOL exchange was then salvaged with the help of the cornea expert's guidance. And the patient is thankfully recovering, but as I look at it, not just it was nightmarish for the surgeon, but the cost of this independence that we gave to the residents, total independence, was borne by the patient. And it is not good if we would inflict such pain on somebody. If we would not want this to happen to us, why would we inflict that on somebody? Hence, I would like to tell you all that attitudes would change and mistakes would decrease with the sense of responsibility coming in as a name of a person comes in. Residents do not have their name. They're generally operating under the supervision of somebody. So they are not many times as, what should I say, as, sometimes they can be careless and they are not as responsible at times, and their knowledge and increased practical learning would decrease the mistakes. This is a walk down memory lane. This is myself operating under the guidance of my own thesis guide. And it's actually, ultimately, the responsibility comes down when you are yourself giving the results and you are restoring vision. Not to say that one has to be callous during the residency, but then one should be given some amount of supervision also. So I'm thanking you all for a patient audience.
Thank you, Dr. Sonal Kalia. As we are running shortage of time, if anybody has any query or comments, you can keep it. We'll, at the end of the session, we'll perform. May I now request the next part, that is performing perimetry by residents, to do or not to do.
Thank you.
The first one, Dr. Mayur Marikar, to do.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. And I generally do start my presentations with acknowledgements to my teachers of my residency and my fellowship. And my topic for today is to talk in favor of performing perimetry by residents. And we all know that the role of perimetry in ophthalmic practice cannot be overemphasized. Coming to the question, why performing perimetry by residents, and we look at it from 2 points of view, the resident learning point of view and the patient care point of view. The first one, that is the resident learning point of view. This was used in the previous slide by the previous speaker. It ensures direct purposeful experiences, which are actually first-hand experiences which serve as the foundation of learning. More senses are used in order to build up knowledge. And hence, residents, when they learn by doing things themselves or herself, they learn through actual hands-on experiences. It also ensures what is called learning by doing. Learning by doing is a principle which has many proponents and includes learning by doing, learning by discovery versus instruction, practical experience versus book learning, the practice theory, practice dialectic, and proof upon practice. The third point is how residents can then be a part of the decision-making team. Perimetry, we all know, requires a team approach where we have 3 points: the patient, the doctor, and the examiner. And the interplay between all three of them is important. From the patient care point of view, the role of the examiner in a perimetry is all important. With due respect to all our perimetry examiners, the optometrists who generally do the perimetry, the extent of untrustworthy results largely depends on how well the perimetry is performed in clinical practice, and it has been reported to range from 3 to 29% of all visual field tests which are important. Thus, the role of the perimetry examiner is all important. And if the resident is put into the role of the perimetry examiner, it may add to the trustworthiness of the report, obviously under the supervision of more experienced examiners. But what it will do is, it will definitely add to the sensitization of the residents to the problems faced by the patients while performing the perimetry test. The perimetry test is not a very simple test for the patient to perform. And if the patients are there as examiners, then they definitely will be sensitized to the problems faced by the patients. To look at whether perimetry is a part of the curriculum, we look at the ICO residency curriculum. It states that in the second year, the resident should be able to describe and interpret more advanced forms of perimetry, various strategies such as threshold testing, supra-threshold testing, and the special algorithms. When we look at our national curriculum, it says that the resident must be well versed with investigative modalities, although he may or may not perform it himself or herself. However, he should be able to interpret the tests. So to conclude, one may include perimetry in the curriculum as performing perimetry for residents, because it will enhance direct purposeful learning, it will enhance learning by doing, it will make the resident a part of the team and give him the extremely important role of the perimetry examiner, although under supervision, a part of the decision-making process. It may enhance the trustworthiness of the report and will definitely sensitize the resident to patient problems. To conclude, we all have seen this many times before. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mayur. To finish within time, may I now request Dr. J.L. Goyal not to do perimetry performing by the residents.
So good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I thank Dr. Partha Vishwas and his ARC team for giving me the chance to speak on performing perimetry by residents not needed. Performing perimetry by residents is not required because performing perimetry is a job of technician and it's not a job of a resident. And time is needed in explaining the procedure and executing the test. It may take up to 45 minutes for both eyes if the patient is not able to follow the instructions, especially in old age. Poor results that are difficult to interpret are often due to the fact that the patient either did not understand what was required or did understand but was unable to respond. So technician or optometrist is cost effective. He may be paid 1/4 of what is paid to the resident, and because he is doing from morning to evening the same test, the performance of the test is much more reliable than the performance by the resident. So the interpretation will also be wrong, and subsequently the patient's management also can go in a wrong direction. Residents can examine 4 or 5 patients during the time taken for one visual field, and this becomes important in crowded OPDs. Pupil size, whether the pupil was dilated, whether the upper lid had to be taped up, and or if any corrective lenses were used, have to be mentioned by the optometrist or the technicians. Residents, however, should be aware as to how to carry out the procedure, which can be learnt in a short time if needed for his own practice. A resident's job should be to read the printout and not to perform the test. Visual field defects are not limited to glaucoma. It is important to examine the retina and optic disc carefully to assess whether or not visual field matches with the appearance of the disc or retina. This cannot be done by optometrists or technicians, but only residents can do, but it takes only few minutes. Residents should be aware of how to interpret reliability indices, raw data, total deviation, mean deviation, and pattern standard deviation. Hence, it is more important is to read, evaluate, and plan the management of the patient as a doctor. So, to conclude, in my opinion, performing perimetry, whether manual or automated, is a job of technician and not of a resident. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goyal. Our next topic is performing retinal diagnostics, required or not required. The first speaker, Dr. Kiran Kumar, he will be speaking, it is required.
I would like to thank ARC team for having me here. Retinal diagnostics includes fundus photos, B-scan, FFA, OCT, autofluorescence, OCT angio, ICG angiography, ERG, and VEP. Why retinal diagnostics are required? Because to what we see clinically to confirm the diagnosis and to differentiate diagnosis, to rule out some differential diagnosis, and by diagnosing a condition, what is the prognosis of that condition, and what is the treatment that is applicable for that particular condition. We have to determine by this retinal diagnostics. For all residents who see in the OPD, by clinical examination, it should be supported by the investigations, and all the retinal investigations, whichever that come, B scan, FFA, OCT, will have its own learning curve. It takes some time to learn. So to start as early as possible, the learning the things is very good, and patient satisfaction by doing investigations will improve the confidence of residents. And B scan, the most common indications being corneal scars, occlusio pupils, total cataract, and vitreous opacities. In all, we will discuss in further class. These should be basic things among the many things. This is just drop of ocean, a few conditions here, and we will see all the conditions. We will have didactic lectures by eminent speakers in coming 4 days, and these are the few conditions where we do B scan. And this is one is a total corneal scar, mature cataract, occlusio pupil, endophthalmitis, vitreous hemorrhage, and B scan. How to do a B scan? We will see all these things in coming days by didactic lectures. And there are few basic things. This is for only residents. If you become a retina expert, then we have to see many more things. These are the few basic things we have to see in a B scan by the resident, and in the FFA also. A few most common conditions where we do FFA by residents is diabetic retinopathy, vein occlusions, ARMD, and CSCR. And phases of this is a star mark question for every resident. We must learn all these things and how to interpret the FFA and diabetic retinopathy. By doing all these things in the residency itself will increase our clinical knowledge, and this should be performed by all the residents. This is wet AMD. And OCT also, if not many institutes are having OCT, if at all having, this should be learned by resident in the residency itself, because all the layers, because OCT is useful not only for posterior segment, and it is useful for glaucoma and also anterior segment. We can see all the layers of retina. And with the advent of OCT, FFA use is a little bit less, because FFA is invasive, and whereas OCT is non-invasive, and it is very fast, and it can be done in non-mydriatic people also. And a few basic things we have to see in OCT this is for resident level. So vitreomacular traction, intraretinal fluids, subretinal fluids, and intraretinal hemorrhages and hot X-rays, that is ISOS junction, and RPE integrity and structure.
Last 1 minute.
Yes. And these are the few common indications for OCT. And what we see clinically, this is the most common things what we see in regular our own OPDs. So these things should be learned by residency itself, and VEP and ERG interpretation, or if some patient brings out the printout of VEP or ERG, how to read it. Otherwise, many of them only research institutes will do this, and not routinely. And retinal diagnostics include the X-ray, CT, and MRI of brain and orbits to rule out foreign bodies. And this is a fracture of orbital apex, which leads to optic atrophy. And MRI in case of thinning of optic nerve, leading to optic atrophy. These things, at least we in the residency itself, if you can learn few things, we can have more confidence in our practice. So my take-home message is, learning retinal diagnostics is must for residents. The basic things includes B scan and FFA and OCT, apart from X-ray, CT scan, and MRI orbits, a few basic things. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Kiran Kumar. May I now request Dr. Jasprit. He will be talking not required. Performing retinal diagnostics by the residents, not required.
This is not the one. This is the keynote address which I have to give. And this,
Preet will be speaking on
Yeah.
online resources for PG training.
This is the one, after this, can I give the keynote or in the end should I give the keynote?
You can do this thing first, and then you can
At the
start
end, you
your
can go for the
keynote address.
So should I continue after this?
You can continue.
Thank you. उसके बाद change कर देना. Thank you. Yes, I mean retinal diagnostics are becoming increasingly important, but residents should be taught clinical skills first. If they are taught how to diagnose things, how to suspect things, then probably every case what they suspect would not require retinal imaging. So retinal imaging with technology has become the fad in today's era. The clinical skills are taking a back foot because you are going in for everything like an MRI, that yes, I will have a simplified printout of something and then I'll go retrospective in my diagnosis. But first and foremost are the clinical skills. These retinal imaging diagnostics are machine-based and are prone to errors and artifacts. And here comes the role of the clinical acumen. So for residents, I feel that they should have first learn how to examine a patient properly before going into the retinal diagnostics. Retinal diagnostics is expensive. These machines are not affordable to everybody, and so a tailored approach is what is needed. The interpretation of this complex imaging is still not standardized, and the algorithms require expertise. They differ from machine to machine. They have artifacts. So sometimes if you just try to rely on these machines, then things can go wrong in the treatment. It may bring out lesions which are benign, but that may put a psychological stress on the patient. So everything is not retinal diagnostics. You have like OCT, you have FFA, ERG. These cannot be relied upon alone as a tool for diagnosis. These may be misleading if a proper clinical exam is not done. So first and foremost, like if you have a disc, now whether that is glaucomatous or a neurological, should be the clinical acumen rather than sending the patient for getting an OCT done and then going back and seeing what it is. We have the adverse effects of ICG and FFA, which are well known. These are invasive tests. These cause hypersensitivity reactions. So patients, if you just order, if it's a resolving papilledema and you think of it's like an anterior ischemic optic neuropathy and order an FFA and the patient gets a reaction, probably those retinal diagnostics are not really required by the residents. It's more of clinical examination, evaluation, whether the patient has a field defect, is it altitudinal, how was the vision loss, and all these stuff. So these can prove fatal in those with renal disorders or liver problem if ignorant about the patient history. So the resident should see the patient as a whole and not just be looking at the eye if you're going in for the retinal diagnostics. So there is a difference between the results of different machines which measure the same parameter, and this could lead to confusion and interpretation because these machines are still not standardized to give a progression, as they just give out a simple anatomical printout of what is going on. There has started a race for machines rather than skills with this advancing technology, which I feel the resident should not be a part of. However, even though legal battles force one to over-investigate, retinal diagnostics should not overpower clinical thinking. Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Now you can continue with
Okay.
your keynote address, online resources for PG training, Dr. Jasprit.
second वाला जो बोला था, ऊपर वाला ऊपर, yes, fourth. Yes. तो 10 मिनट है. Thank you. Yes, I'll be speaking some of these tools which have become convenient for the resident to have a look in their free time. And so these are the online resources for PG training and which we can inculcate in our practice as well. So in today's era of technology, education is not merely limited to classroom teaching. It's smart teaching now which starts from schools. And so accessible internet resources have increased the information base by leaps and bounds. There are numerous e-learning portals which offer interactive and well-designed study modules. So I'll be touching upon some of these, some of the popular ones. There are so many of them, I mean, if you just start searching the internet. So iguru.org. It was built by 2 residents from UCLA and a medical student. So basically it's the experience of the residents themselves. It's targeted specifically for beginning ophthalmology residents. So this is just to show you a snapshot of the website which is there. So it has like essentials, it has a practice, it has blogs, videos. So it has very high quality content which is organized quite well with high resolution images. There are mini courses which offer digestible articles to learn and offer a unique practical tips on the resident's life as well. So these have been contributions from various institutes, world institutes like Doheny, UCLA, you have Arvind, you have Massachusetts. So this is one of the website which is quite popular. So one of the sub-modules in this is like if you have the practice modules, you can start off whichever content and whichever subject you write, then the videos which have different kinds of phacoemulsifications ranging from basics to advanced. So these are all drawn category-wise. The next is the American Academy of Ophthalmology, the One Network, which is the Ophthalmic News and Education Network. Again, you have a wide range of videos covering all specialties. You have access to publications, you have latest research, and of course it's optimized for mobile phones. So wherever you have an internet connection, I mean, you can just scan on your mobile phone and you can open up anything here, whatever you are interested in. And the best part is it's all free, and you just have to log in, create a login and a username once, and then you can access these sites. So this is one of the sites of the AAO, which is the Pediatric Ophthalmology Education Center, and it's a strabismus simulator. So you can easily see the cover test, the prism bar cover test being performed in a very simple way, and which will helpful to the resident who can maybe examine the patient in the clinic and then go home and then see how it is done, or maybe just have a look one day before. You have these wonderful cases, the Grand Rounds, which is the irounds.org. It's an education portal by the University of Iowa. So you have the case reports from the morning Grand Rounds, which is very informative and interactive. You have images, you have videos, tutorials. It is the highest quality ophthalmology education resource which is produced through an academic institution. So you have different, again you have cases, you have an atlas, you have videos, tutorials, and just everything. So you can access anything from this place. You have a good discussion at the end of the case, and so it's quite informative that way. So one of the other thing which you opened is like if you open the cases, I mean you can just see the case reports here, which are again different based on different subjects. If you want to have cataract, cornea, neuro-ophthalmology, glaucoma, all these are very well tabulated, and one can go stepwise and then have a look at these. So one of the sublinks is like the gonioscopy. So if you want to learn gonioscopy from basic to advanced, you have wonderful pictures, you have a tutorial how to be done, you have a video showing the various angles in a normal patient versus patients with different types of angle closure. So a very informative website. So then is the itube.net. Of course, it's a video library. It's the largest ophthalmic surgical video library of narrated, physician-created content on cataract. So there's a narration along with it, just not a video, and on almost all subjects which require surgery in ophthalmology. It has more than 3,000 videos, and is the only online archive of fully narrated ophthalmology videos. So I mean, if you have this like a video here of the Malyugandarin, there's narration along with that, and so it's easy to understand what is going on at every step. So even you can submit your videos here. I mean, this is one of the places where you can submit your videos. So if you have a good video, I mean, they are ready to accept it. So it's a good portal for even submission and then having a look at the various other submissions which have been done. So it's not just animated stuff. It's submission by any person, any resident or any other senior faculty member. So there's one of the earliest sites to start was the cybersite.com. It's from Orbis. It's an online training and mentorship service for eye health professionals in developing countries. So mainly started in the developing countries. So I mean, you can have, they have live webinars which are quite popular at the cyber site. Then you have online courses and you have a whole library. Again, you just have to sign in here, which is again free. All these websites which I've just spoken about are free. You just have to log in, create a username, and then you can just browse them. So these are just some of the, so it's a free online course in ophthalmology which you have here, and you can just open up any subject and just browse it and have a look at what all is the, what basically the resident requires for his or her purpose. Again, in ICU educators, I mean, this is more of exam-oriented stuff, and of course, how to a general ophthalmology awareness and guidelines, how they need to be formulated. It's more of this. Plus, they do have some kind of lectures. I mean, like the neuro-ophthalmology and maybe some of the other stuff what they have on the glaucoma. So you just have to log in again, and you can have a whole, like a whole PDF file, and you can read whatever you want. Then you have this, the columbiaeye.org. It's a digital reference of ophthalmology. It's an internet-based clinical atlas which provides color images of entities encountered in ophthalmic practice, accompanied by concisely written text and various ophthalmic diagnostic images. So you have a text basically written, and again you have these various subjects where you can browse whatever part of the eye you're interested in. You can see this. Mostly these images have captions, they are decent resolution, and so they are organized quite well, but of course case presentations are a few. That's more in the eyerounds.org. So then you have this atlas. You have the whole image library, which is the atlasophthalmology.net. It has thousands and thousands of images of various eye conditions and diagnostic tests, mostly with brief commentary. It's an extensive library. The sections are well organized, as you can see in the green panel there. Submissions are reviewed by a board of editors, so obviously there is authenticity. It is endorsed by the International Council of Ophthalmology, and you have an iPhone app as well. So again, I mean, if you just want to browse images, if you see something in the clinic and you want to just browse, okay, fine, it could be this or that, you can just have a look at this website. Then this was started by again Dr. Timothy Root, the Root Eye Network. It's like an e-book. So it's 180 pages long. It serves as a great primer to major concepts in ophthalmology. He does have a link to his atlas, which contains short videos, and they're helpful for clinical ophthalmology. So, of course, this is one of the sites. I mean, so there are different websites which one can visit and see whatever is basically most useful. Then you have the Wills Eye Hospital. This is the book. So this is an online textbook. So available on the web. So you don't need to carry a hard copy everywhere. So something which is available on the web, you can easily browse, see the index, and then just read up the basic stuff what is required. Then you have specific ophthalmic pathology websites like the missionforusa.org. You can have all types of slides here, and they will tell you how to do the staining. Then you have specific websites for the genetics oncology. You have the Kogan collection again, where you have different kinds of stains, and then you have different slides. So basically more for the, if you're into the ocular pathology. Then you have certain neuro-ophthalmology sites as well, and this is one of the very popular site, which is the novel.uta.edu. It's an extensive library with the most comprehensive online resources for neuro-ophthalmology. So special collections of some of the great ophthalmologists are available for free and serves as the official NANOS. That's the North American Neuro-Ophthalmology Society website. So it's quite a popular website, and you can open up just anything here down. You can just put anything here in this, any neuro-ophthalmology issue, and then it will crop up and show you all the discussion which has been there, the pros and cons for everything. So this is another one from the Canadian part of the world, and this is the official website of the Canadian Neuro-Ophthalmology Group. Again, it has an online textbook of various eye movements that's good for learning and understanding nystagmus, and video links. So there are good videos which one can see and learn. And then the Stanford, again, it has a quiz, and there's a link to the eye quiz. So basically, it's a free educational source with 3,000 questions, and you can just, the residents can prepare for their exams if they want to by just having a brief knowledge for the interviews, especially from this website. So some of the Indian websites are from Sankar and Arvind Eye Care are these ones. And so Google offers search on specific topics, but comprehensive coverage is always handy. These portals are there to supplement. They are not the only tool. They're just a supplement to what else, to the learning you do. It's an instant, economical, and convenient access to an ocean of information. Thank you. And you're all invited here. We are going to have a pediatric ophthalmology conference in Chandigarh in August, and you can just log on to psn.in for further details. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jaspreet. Now we will call the next speaker. Next topic is retinoscopy and refraction by residents, must versus optional. And Dr. Kamaljeet Singh will be speaking on retinoscopy.
Sir, it's
must.
indirect. Sir, it's indirect ophthalmoscopy.
Indirect. This one. Sorry, indirect ophthalmoscopy with scleral indentation.
Dr. Abhishek.
Yes. Yes. इधर आइए.
It's not coming there. Dignitaries on the dais and dear audience, a very good afternoon to you all. Before I express my views on the topic given to me by the chairman ARC on indirect ophthalmoscopy with scleral depression for residents to do, I would just like to have a start it with the thing that post-graduation is the time when residents learn the practice, imbibe and follow it till life. And if I am not wrong, many of the previous speakers have already told that learning by doing is a better way to imbibe things. And it also becomes important for the teachers to tell them the best practice. And times are changing and so is the surgical exposure of the residents. I got a very few number of cataract surgeries, but now as I ask the residents who have been passed out, they are overwhelmed saying that yes, the surgeries are increasing. So each surgery has a learning curve and cataract surgery is not alien to it. Notable complications of cataract surgery include posterior capsular rupture with or without vitreous loss, retained lens fragment, pseudophakic retinal detachments, cystoid macular edema, and post-operative endophthalmitis. Even if the cataract surgery is uneventful, there are chances of acute PVD. And 10 to 15% of acute symptomatic PVD cases will develop a retinal tear. And when it is associated with vitreous hemorrhage, chances are as high as 70%. There was a study published in Ophthalmology in year 2007 which showed that if the patient is having a peripheral lattice degeneration, the chances of PVD are 87% as compared to 73% when there is no lattice degeneration. Apart from that, the patients who develop a retinal detachment after cataract surgery with lattice degeneration are 21% as compared to 0.7% in the normal eyes. So, if we are missing a lattice degeneration in a patient who is going to be operated for cataract surgery, we are exposing him to a risk of as high as 30 times as compared to the normal patient. Preferred practice, as has been mentioned, is indirect ophthalmoscopy combined with scleral depression. But why scleral depression? It is because areas near the pars plana and ora serrata can be examined clearly. Apart from that, it enhances contrast between a retinal lesion and the surrounding retinal tissue. Retinal lesions that are not well defined, for example, suspected retinal holes, tears, or vitreoretinal lesions, are examined with ease. As you can see here, in this cystic retinal tuft is becoming more evident with scleral depression. Apart from that, there are lawsuits also in the states by the name of, in the company of Ophthalmic Mutual Insurance Company, and this is a company of San Francisco in which the last 7 years of data till 2014 showed that there were 1,613 ophthalmic malpractices claims, and out of them 14% were of diagnostic errors. And of these 233 patients, 84 patients were having retinal problems of retina, and 65 patients they were having a retinal detachment. So, I would just like to question, is a cataract surgery performed in a case of stye or dacrocystitis? Is cataract surgery performed in a case of acute angle closure immediately or acute uveitis? No. Then why should it be performed in a patient with a lattice degeneration or any treatable peripheral lesion without getting it lasered? So I would like to thank my team of CL Gupta Institute for giving me their inputs regarding this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, last one is Dr. Pankaj Bandele. He will be speaking on indirect ophthalmoscopy, not required.
So first I thank organizers for giving me opportunity, and I'm here to speak indirect ophthalmoscopy with scleral depression for residents not to do. I have no financial interest. Yeah, so this was a unique topic. I had to search on the net to take out few of the points, but as previous speaker has spoken out, that importance is there. Peripheral retina should be examined, and that is understood point and valid points taken. But whether residents should do it or not, that was the point, and that was the debating point. So there is a patient discomfort, significantly higher level of discomfort with scleral depression than without scleral depression. So that factor is definitely there. Subconjunctival hemorrhage, few of the adverse issues that can come up if we say that every patient who is undergoing any cataract surgery or any intraocular surgery should have peripheral retina examined. And with the resident doing that, I don't know, some of these, even this kind of a subconjunctival hemorrhage can be an issue from the patient side, because prima facie it looks like my eye was white and quiet after examination, now it has become serious red eye. So due to excessive or improper use of scleral depression, this can be an issue. And then again, we have to counsel the patient for something of this issue. Now the risk of retinal tear at the ora serrata, where the vitreous collagen fibrils firmly attached at right angles with the intervening extracellular matrix to interlimiting membrane of the peripheral retina. Tractional forces here may overcome retinal integrity forces, resulting in retinal tears. So if inadvertently, if this kind of tear happens because of residents' wrong pressure on the sclera, so that can be an issue. Now, suppose unoperated eye, definitely not an issue. But suppose it is an operated eye with big incisions, SICS or other things, then there can be an issue, because sometimes there can be an eventful cataract surgery, lens can be in the sulcus, and wrong pressure on the globe can cause dislocation of the intraocular lens. There is also the report of acute rise in IOP. Definitely, if you indent the eye and if you keep it pressed for a long time, it will increase the eye pressures, and sometime in the advanced cupping, that can be significant for some of the optic nerves. There is one case report here reported in the Indian Journal about excessive use of this indenter causing the corneal perforation. So something that can be an issue. So that's what issue is not about whether it should be done or not, whether residents should be allowed to do it or not, and under the observation, and in particular cases where it should be avoided, better residents, you don't handle this case, and seniors or maybe the retina specialist will handle this case. That was the point, and I feel some of the cases residents should not be allowed to do the indirect ophthalmoscopy with scleral depression, because it can again add some new issue to the problem which are already existing there. ROP screening, that one particular point I will add, because of some few of the literature I got. One is oculocardiac reflex also in the pediatric population, and again extensive bilateral intraretinal hemorrhages in a premature patients with active ROP after an examination with scleral depression. So some of these kind of points are also there. So where I feel it is good. IO is good with the scleral depression is good, but should be left to the seniors hand in at least few cases where things can go wrong. So in infants presented with large diverse change regarding the pulse. So there is a oculocardiac reflex noted thing in the ROP screening, and that's why I feel it should be left to the seniors and not to the residents, at least in few cases. So that's what the point I want to convey. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, all the speakers. We are already overshooting 20 minutes. The timekeepers are repeatedly pursuing. Just one thing from my side, that is actually lot of things has been discussed, particularly regarding the critical point is the surgery and the other procedures. And when there is a critical point, when somebody will be independent. So how long he will be guided, at which time he will be independent. That is the most important point. At one stage, you have to hand over to somebody, and up to that level, he will be guided. This is the critical point, and this is the $1 million question. At which time I will give my resident independently do something. And this is the judge from both the residents as well as his guide. Residents has to be confident that from now onwards I will be independently, I am capable of to handle the thing independently, so that the patient does not suffer. And at the same time, the guide will be confident that my residence has reached in such a point that I can leave the patient to him and he will not harm any patient. Thank you very much.